Why is Highway 167 such an important project for our district?
Well, I'm convinced that Highway 167 is the #1 economic development project in the state of Washington. Whether you're talking to farmers in eastern Washington, whether you're talking to industrial shippers in the Kent Valley, whether you're talking to folks out on the Port of Tacoma, it is a critical economic development project. And it's, of course, a huge project for our area. It'll make a big difference in bringing jobs to our area, maintaining the competitiveness of the Port of Tacoma at a time when there's some major competitive threats, whether it's the ports up in British Columbia, the ports also along the West Coast or down in Mexico. We've got to maintain our competitive advantage, and transportation infrastructure is absolutely key. It'll also help with congestion on I-5, help with congestion on the existing stretch of 167. In the long term, we've got to make the investment in expanding the hot lanes on Highway 167 from Puyallup up to Auburn and from Auburn down to Puyallup. There is a plan within existing the budget of the Transportation Department to complete the hot lanes from Highway 18 down to Jovita Boulevard starting in the 2017 biennium. But we've got to be aggressive about finishing those hot lanes all the way so that we can have congestion relief. But the coalition right now in Pierce County and across the state has come together around finishing Highway 167, that 6-mile stretch from where it dead ends in Puyallup out to the Port of Tacoma, and we've got to get that done this year.
Why didn't we finish 167 years ago?
Well, it should have been done years ago, and it's a project that's been talked about for 40 years, really. And what's happened in the meantime is that trucks have been using side streets through Fife and through Puyallup to get out to the Port of Tacoma and to get from the Port of Tacoma out onto our roadways. Our infrastructure is totally inadequate. And at a time when we face these competitive threats from the Panama Canal, among other things, that's one thing I didn't mention yet, is that the Panama Canal is being widened, and a lot of trade that traditionally has come through our West Coast ports out to the Midwest can now go to the East Coast. And so we've got to maintain and build out our road infrastructure to continue to attract trade from Asia.
What other projects are being discussed for a transportation funding package?
One of the major ones that has a big impact on Pierce County is widening I-5 through JBLM. And that's something that has needed to be done also for a number of years. We're talking about a 1950s era freeway there through JBLM, and the Senate proposal on transportation would put $450 million into that widening. One of the key pieces there is the Thorn Lane interchange around Lakewood, and that would be critical to the eventual completion of the Cross Base Highway. It's something that would be really important for relieving congestion on South Hill, out to Frederickson, and in that part of Pierce County. Another project that's important in terms of freight mobility and in terms of our trade competitiveness is the completion of Highway 509 off of the Port of Seattle down to I-5. And a lot of people have talked about that in the same context as Highway 167 because those are both important trade routes.
Should a transportation package include reforms to how the state spends tax dollars?
No question. We need reforms with any transportation funding package that's going to go forward from the legislature this year. And there's people in both parties who want to make sure that that happens. And I've been involved in several of the reforms. One, to streamline permitting based on some recommendations that came out of a panel of stakeholders several years ago. And it's time that we finally codify those recommendations to use best practices in permitting and streamline that process. Another one is to expedite permitting and contracting when we replace structurally deficient bridges. As constituents know, we're in the process right now of replacing the Puyallup River Meridian Street Bridge, which was built in 1925. It's rated 2 out of 100 on the scale of structural sufficiency. 17,000 cars a day go over that bridge, and it should have been replaced years ago. After the collapse of the Skagit River Bridge, that was a wake-up call to a lot of people about the 130 structurally deficient bridges in Washington State that desperately need to be replaced. And we need to expedite the process to replace those bridges. Another bill that I've proposed is to get started on public-private partnerships for non-toll projects like park and rides and ferry terminals. We need to bring in new kinds of financing to get infrastructure built in creative ways in our communities and make sure that we're getting our economy moving.